glimpsed in Nerf.
It's a sad, dark day, is it not? Our favorite loot cave has been destroyed. Rest in peace, Eridu Ruins. And it's at this point that I feel like I need to have a talk about this, because it's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? It's almost this state of every time we find a new efficient way to do something, we're all just kind of sat there like, God, I can't wait for it to get nerfed in 12 hours. Oh, it's this constant presence looming, with that Nerf bat covered in legendary loot denying nails. And I get the general principle of why this happens. They have in mind a correct flow of loot that should result in the optimum experience for the player. They don't want you to get too little and feel discouraged, like nothing's changing with your build or you're not making any progress. They don't want you to get too much so you don't feel like you've finished quicker and therefore stop playing and then they lose you until the next season, etc. But at the same time, I feel like that fundamentally misses a vital part of what is going on in Diablo 4, of what we want in Diablo 4, hell, of what humans want from their games. And this might sound obvious, but it's missing fun. You know, that fundamental, it's in the word, you can't have fundamental without fun, reason that we do all of this. It's not a job, although I grant that a lot of us do treat it like that, but that's fun in its own way. It's a leisure activity, so when what is fun is nerfed into the ground with nothing else buffed to compensate, it just starts to wear you, doesn't it? It starts to grind you down, it starts to feel inevitable and pointless because anything good, anything fun is removed. And yes, that also extends to class balance and such, the general principle of let's make what's powerful weaker instead of let's buff what's weak to be stronger to compete. It's just, in my mind, a complete reverse of sensible games design. But I don't want to get distracted on the non-loot cave elite changes side of things. But this, adjustments to monster density in dungeons. You may think that obviously there is more ways to have fun than just farming constant dungeons, getting constant loot, constantly upgrading your gear and leveling up as fast as possible. And you are totally right. Someone who has been savoring the game, they're level 30, they're still in like Act 3 or 4, enjoying the story, doing side quests, that is not invalid. That is a totally fair and fine way to play the game, and I applaud anyone who is doing that. But at the same time, you can't ignore the entire reason that most people play an ARPG, the bedrock of this genre, and it is two pillars attached to that bedrock. Pillar A is mowing down hordes of enemies. You know, like Hell's armies that we're constantly fighting off in Diablo games, endless legions that grind you down with overwhelming numbers, so you should just be causing carnage as you slaughter hundreds of them in densely packed areas as they can do nothing to stop you. That, you know, awesome fantasy. And then Pillar 2, as a reward for that, being showered in shiny sparkly gear with shiny sparkly numbers that make your build do a bit better so you can do a bit more and get even more shiny sparkly bits of armor. It's that dopamine hamster wheel, and I have no shame in indulging in it despite knowing that, and I'm sure you guys don't too. So when we find a new way to efficiently run on that sweet, sweet wheel, having it instantly removed with nothing in return is just soul-destroying. It really is. And no, it's not getting nerfed because of content creators making videos on it. Blizzard is very aware of what the player base is doing. It's an always online game. They have stats. They know who's where and what level doing what activity. And they can see when a dungeon has a massive spike in usage and they know what's going on. They have their ear to the ground, and in fairness to their credit at least, they are very quick on addressing everything that we have discovered over the last week that is in their mind too efficient. But that word efficient is a huge deal here, because it is human nature, and you can never balance against, fight against, counteract human nature. It is human nature to find the most efficient, the path of least resistance, the most min-max, bang for your buck, time value way of achieving any given task. That counts in all walks of life, from your job to, yes, your games. So in a game like this, where the number one goal is to get more powerful, either by gear or level, however that ends up being the most efficient way to do that is what we will flock to. And in this case, it was the loot caves. Which brings me on to a very potent, I think, tenet wisdom of games design. Because a game designer is very aware that a player will min-max the fun out of any system. A player will choose to do the thing that gets the most rewards the fastest, even if that thing is boring, dull, or repetitive, versus arguably a more fun thing like pushing nightmare dungeons if it's not as rewarding. Again, human nature, and it's hard to go against that. Obviously, you personally might not feel that way, but as a general player base, that is always what tends to happen. I've got a degree in games design, and it's something I'm very, very interested in, and this has always been a constant battle when you watch developer interviews and behind the scenes and stuff. A player will always efficiency the fun out of the systems you present them, and an ARPG is prime for that. And the solution is not to nerf what they have done, because that is just a huge kick in the teeth. The solution, and the best way to deal with it, and a really good way of creating a compelling game, is to identify what is the most efficient way of doing something, and make that fun. That suddenly turns it on its head, and everyone is happy. The second alternative, which is what I think Blizzard should really be doing here, instead of just purely nerfing every loot cave and every outlier we find and enjoy, is instead of nerfing the thing we're doing, you need to buff the thing they want us to be doing to make it more worthwhile, or even the best. If they want us to be doing high nightmare dungeons, if that's their end game, which it is by all accounts, then you don't nerf the loot caves. You go, hey, we have buffed nightmare dungeons, so the higher your sigil, the more loot you get, the higher quality is, and the more XP you get. We've made it so it's not just up to 3 levels higher than the player you get extra XP, it just keeps scaling. There's diminishing returns, but if you can push a nightmare dungeon that's 25 levels above you, there's nothing in the game that's more rewarding than that. And then suddenly, you know, Master has given Dobby a sock, and suddenly we stop just farming the same normal dungeon on loop over and over and over again, not even completing it, and we go do the actual fun endgame content that's challenging, that requires good builds, because if we can get good at it, well then suddenly it's more rewarding than the loot caves. Leave those loot caves as they are for people that want them, and then buff the actual activities that they want us, the players, to be doing, and then everyone is happy, because we feel like we've gained something, not lost something, despite them achieving the same goal of getting us to just stop farming the same loot cave over and over. And then we bring up the final little point here, in that, well, if they just buff the other thing, then that means that rate of getting gear and XP is going to continue no matter where it is, and that's too fast, that's too much. And to that I say, on the XP front, that might be fair enough. Just tone down XP gain if they don't want people getting to level 100 or getting too high too quickly before the first season. I think what level we are isn't as important as the loot side of things. If it is as hard as it is to swap builds, to experiment, to try other abilities, then you need to have a compromise. That compromise either needs to be a system to help swap builds, like spec swapping in an MMO. You can just click on a tab and go to a different build with a different setup, or you have to be able to get so much loot so quickly that you can find the gear to try a completely different way of playing your class without it feel like a pointless monumental task. For me to swap from Arclash to Ice Shard so I could show you guys that build, it took about 8 hours of hard grinding to get just good enough gear to be able to bring my idea to life, to get the gold to do everything, to actually make it work. And finally I did it, and I presented it to you. And I'm literally playing the game like it's my job. A normal player trying to swap builds, or hell, God forbid, trying to experiment with builds, if you put the time, money, gold, and grind into trying a setup, and then it's too weak or it doesn't work, so you then have to put the time, money, gold, and grind to go back to your previous build, that is just a waste of a day, and it feels so awful. It really does. My only complaint with Diablo 4, well, not my only, but my biggest complaint by far is how anti-build swapping and experimenting the game seems to be set up as. They want you to kind of just choose your build and then work on it forever, and that's that. But there's so many cool spells, so many cool effects, some of which are a bit too weak, but that's a numbers tweaking thing. Mechanically, there's so many interesting ways to play every class that you want to experiment and find new ways that are strong enough to actually handle the end game. But it's just so resource, time, and mental space demanding to do so that it's hard to justify it. So as soon as loot caves get nerfed without anything else getting buffed, it makes that side of things even more oppressive, and it's like, why would I ever swap builds if I cannot do anything quickly to do so, or God forbid swap back? That's just a very much side, kind of relevant, kind of not, tangent for me when it comes to this. The point is, there is 3 fundamental ways to balance a game. There is make everything weak, so everything is equally weak. There is make something strong today, make something else strong tomorrow. Every class gets a turn at being the best. Every farming method gets a turn at being the best as you play whack-a-mole with balancing. Or there is the third option, which in 90% of situations tends to be the best option, which is,
And when everyone's super!
and if everything is powerful and rewarding, then, well, you can't go wrong. Everything feels good, everyone feels good. It is this note which means when they do the next balance patch, I'm fully expecting them to just nerf the good meta builds instead of buff the underperforming skills, so there is greater diversity and choice while leaving what's currently powerful alone for people that are still enjoying that. But we'll get to that whole talk and can of worms if and when it happens, as supposedly there is a balance patch kind of on the way, but we will see. For now, I just kind of wanted to get it off my chest, this whole constant loot cave nerfing and how I sort of view it, and I hope you have found this interesting at least to listen to, and I really do appreciate how you've all supported our Diablo content, and of course there's many more to go. I do this rant because I do ultimately love the game, and I want it to succeed. I want it to be the best version of it can be. I have not enjoyed Diablo this much since, well, again, literally Diablo 2, and I'm really looking forward to how it evolves through the seasons. So for now, like you've enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below, and until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.